With all the art that I do, and same thing with the podcast, it's all shining a light where I want the viewer's eye to go. That's true in cover art. Know what you're trying to say. That's true in the photography as well as any design I do. And the podcast, editing out all the superfluous stuff. I mean, there's nothing in there that I don't think the listener wants to hear. I have taken the time to edit out. I've dedicated time so that you don't have to waste time.
Has your life, your dreams been interrupted? Good news. It is possible to reinvent our lives. People are doing it every day, and some are brave enough to share the struggles, disappointments, and challenges. If you are looking for a new beginning, a do-over, or to rediscover your passion, maybe even find a new one, then grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Interrupted, Act 2, Reinventing Your Legacy, with your host, Coach Lori.
Hara Allison, congratulations for being nominated as one of the finalists for the Women Changing the World Award. She is also a photographer and a podcaster. Her podcast is called Beneath Your Beautiful, You're Beautiful. Mission-driven, committed to spreading positivity and hope, improving lives through raw and compassionate storytelling. What I love, of course, is because it's very similar to mine. You're sharing stories of people who have been through some adversity and come out on the other side. So welcome.
Thank you.
What brought you to do a podcast?
5 years ago, about the end of 2019, I went to a conference in Toronto because I have been a graphic designer my whole life, and I was needing some inspiration. That's what I thought I was going for. The name of the conference was called Dreamers. At the beginning of the weekend, I remember thinking, well, that's good for everybody else. I got to make a living. But by the end of the weekend, I was like, oh, I'm a dreamer too. I have passions inside me for a reason. That's what I learned. The passion I had was I had learned to love myself somewhere along the way. And that's what I wished for everybody. But I didn't know how to make that happen. But the very next weekend, I happened to be at a conference for women over 50 in LA. And this woman—
You are not over 50.
I'm 56.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, well, thank you. This woman at this conference, though, kept complaining about the way she looked. I just saw her beauty, and I asked her at the end of the weekend, can I take your picture to show you what I see? And I did it with my iPhone, but that sparked a series called Yes, Yes Magic, which is a favorite line of mine from Streetcar Named Desire. I ended up photographing 25 women before COVID hit. It was going to be 52 women in 52 weeks right before my 52nd birthday. But those photographs and those conversations, and then another series I did called See Me, where women chose words that described who they were, not what they looked like was really powerful and intimate conversations. So between those about 50 conversations I had, I realized that I was a very safe space for people to open up to me. And they told me all of their struggles, but also they're overcoming their struggles. And I wanted to share that with people. And of course, those conversations were private. So I thought, I'll do a podcast. That's how that happened. Circuitous route. But yeah, I couldn't have imagined it 5 years ago.
Wow. And you just were brave enough to push record.
Oh, I was so brave. I thought it, and within 8 days, I was recording my first podcast.
Was it because of those conferences and what you saw in yourself? Like, what gave you the gumption? Because my motto is push record. And I'll tell you, in my classes, every class, there's one that will do it right away. And there's probably 5 that are like, and maybe never do it.
Yeah, I encounter those kind of people all the time, but I'm just a see what happens kind of girl. I'm a yes woman. I love to say yes. If you ask me to travel somewhere, if it's okay, if it's going to work out, I'm probably going to say yes. I just don't want to miss out. I think it's because my mother passed away when she was 46 and I was 18, and her mother died at 46. And I definitely irrationally assumed I was going to die at 46. And so I've just been saying yes, 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 yes. And now I'm 56. And so I'm so excited about that.
You beat the odds.
I beat the odds. And it's the same with learning to love myself. I don't want to waste any of this precious moments that makes me say yes to trying a podcast, yes to whatever, yes to designing a magazine, yes to the worst that can happen is it won't work. I mean, really, That's the worst that can happen. Saturday was my 156th episode, which makes it 3 years of every week doing it.
I saw that and I wanted to commend you.
Thank you.
Because as a podcaster and a podcast teacher, I see a lot of people after 10 episodes or less, they don't get the downloads, which we know that you probably won't get them.
Right.
They give up. And what I see in you is you just have this desire to highlight people. I mean, not only with their voice, but with their picture.
Yeah. I have a few pictures of me and my mom that are like, they're just so precious. I just love those moments and times captured. And when I share somebody's story in my magazine or on the podcast, I always think, how do you want to be remembered? Because it's so fleeting, this life. We're all going to die and you're going to leave something. You get to choose it. That's what I hope anyway.
My podcast class is called Leaving a Legacy. Exactly. One of the things I encourage people to do is push record whether or not you're ever going to post it, because God forbid you leave this planet, you are going to have those recordings on your phone.
Right.
I encourage, especially grandparents, I call them grandpods, just go open your video, tell one story about yourself or your kid, and just then hit stop and just leave it.
I love that.
I was going through my email. I lost a friend 2 years ago to overdose because she couldn't bring herself to go to an emergency room. She had started doing Facebook Lives and she had started sending me her recordings. I ran across them. When she passed, her son couldn't find it because she'd been in and out of recovery houses. Mm-hmm. But now I have these recordings I can send him.
Beautiful. My kids are 28 and 24, and I know the older one listens occasionally to my podcast, but I just think, oh, you're going to be so happy one day to have my voice. I would give anything to hear my mother's voice.
We used to just save the answering machine. That was
right.
The only recording we had.
I just think I'm doing them a service that they don't know about yet.
Can you talk to me about the consistency?
I mean, I think with anything, you have to show up. For me, if I say I'm going to do it, I do it. I think it has built a following. People know that it's going to be there, whether or not I have thought of stopping because it's so much work. The downloads aren't in the thousands or hundreds. It's hard. Sometimes you feel like you're talking to yourself, but then every once in a while, somebody will say, oh, I listened to that episode and it changed me. Somebody said to me once, your podcast is life changing, and those things just keep you going, and you want to make a difference in the world. I think you have to just keep showing up.
Leaders show up.
Mm-hmm.
Something that occurred to me when I was listening to your podcast, there was one about a woman in foster care and about aging out. That's very dear to my heart. I worked in foster care and I have grandchildren that were in foster care. What I thought when I listened was the gift you gave that woman, because now she has a recording of herself telling her story and she has something to share, whether it's ever downloaded on you or for you. Now you have given her this incredible gift. And because I work in radio, sometimes I just have to think that way. I have to think, oh, this is a gift. My sister and I were talking about this morning. When you're an actor, so for me, working in radio, I don't have people running in my studio going, that was the best break. Oh, that was awesome. They run in my studio when I said, oh, the Sounders are playing tonight. And they're like, no, they're not. I don't get that kind of affirmation. I have to just trust in and know that what I'm putting out, that what the content I'm putting out matters. For in radio, content's always been a thing, but for people who have never done radio, it's kind of a new thing. What do you mean content? And like you have a magazine. So, I think hearing you say how important it is to just show up, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. And if I'm expecting one and it doesn't show up, number one, it goes out of my rotation and then I have to remember it to find it. And number two, I don't get offended, but also I'm like, don't they know? Don't they know we're waiting?
Yeah, I do think I'm doing everybody a favor. I don't know if they agree, but I spend so much time. I carefully edit every episode. I mean, every second of every episode. I add breaks in. It takes for a 30-minute conversation like 6 hours for me to edit. And I don't think anybody knows or cares, but I think I'm putting something beautiful out into the world. It's worth it. And like you're saying, you have to believe that someday the gift will be received as the gift it is.
And that was the other comment I wanted to make, because I have to listen to a lot of podcasts. A lot of people don't edit, and I've heard sneezing and coughing and I love my listeners. And that's why when I sent you a thing on how to talk, because I want my listener to feel like they're the only one. Yes. And that they matter. That is highly important. It's the first thing I ever learned in radio. You talk to one person and people will, so there's 3 things people will say if they find out I work in radio. One is they'll be like, I don't listen to the radio. The other one is, so where are you calling in from?
Idaho.
Idaho. So in Seattle, my station's really well known, and you may have heard of this person because she's syndicated, Delilah.
Yeah.
So she used to be on my station. She hasn't been on for over 10 years. The first thing, I work at Warm 106.9. Oh, do you know Delilah?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, but no, I don't work with her. Or they'll be like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know you. The reason is because I talk in a way that I want my person to feel like they're the only one. And I see this epidemic of people going, hey, you guys. And all of a sudden it puts them up a step on a stage. It puts them as they're talking down. They don't mean it. I honestly don't believe these leaders and these podcasters mean it. I think they actually feel like they're being inclusive, but I actually lean in when people aren't saying you guys and hey everybody. I'm like, I feel like I stayed on an email masterclass that I knew I couldn't do the program because her program is very expensive. It's very amazing. But you know why I stayed? Because she kept saying you. And I kept feeling like I'm looking around the Zoom and I'm like, I feel like I'm the only one and she's talking to me and I wanted to stay because I felt like I mattered. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about.
I hate when people say, for your listeners, like, talk to me. It is a genuine, I am having a genuine conversation with you. And when you're not talking to me, I feel left out even. Or what I really dislike is when I'm interviewed on a podcast and they do a pre-interview and then they keep referring to the part where that they weren't included. That makes me crazy. Why are you interviewing me and then interviewing me? Why not have the whole thing so that the listener is included? I loved your rules and I was like, yes, it's so smart to even mention them.
That made me happy because sometimes I feel kind of like a jerk.
No. You have a vision for what you're putting out in the world.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a stand. I have interviewed probably about 3 people that I didn't air their episodes. And that makes you feel like a real jerk, but they weren't right for my audience. My sister helped me with this because I was so torn. And she said, if somebody's going to listen to just one episode and they click on that one, what do you think? So then I was like, okay, well, I can't air it because that's not representative of what I'm trying to put out in the world.
Yeah, it shows integrity. It shows that you value, because my sister did the same thing. I had one and I'm like, what am I going to do? She's like, you're not going to air it. Like, but what I came to this time with this series, it's the same podcast, is I had people sign up. I said, unless you're willing to share the episode, don't even sign up for an interview. Right. Because I like what you said is so important. I put so much time and energy into editing. I don't expect anyone to really notice, but I notice. Mm-hmm. And so then when I make them sound amazing and then they don't even want to share.
I'm 156 episodes in and I don't know how many people have shared. Not all of them for sure. Maybe not half of them. And it is so disappointing. But also then you just got to remember that what do I want to put out into the world? And it's my art. That's why I take such care of it. And same thing with my magazine. It's my art and I'm choosing to do it. And, I have to remember the reasons I'm doing it. Those that do get shared, they get a lot more listens. So it's very beneficial. For me, I don't want to make it a requirement, but I'm also bad at that kind of thing. I'm also bad at closing the deal and selling and those things. So I have a hard time asking for those things. And I appreciate you asking. I think it's so smart.
So what I came to, because I do another podcast that's the public affairs show for mega radio stations in Seattle. Like we are all of the stations, they're the number one in their categories. I get PR people and they'll say, hey, will you do an interview with this author? And I do this interview. And of course, because it has to be exactly 26 minutes, I super edit. Mm-hmm. And I love talking with you about this because you get how tedious. It's tedious.
Tedious.
But often the PR people don't even tell the actual author. So all of a sudden I think for that public affairs, it's free advertising. But also I started to kind of get this resentment and I thought, do I want to be resentful or do I want to be bold? And so the PR people, I'm going to tell them, if you schedule an appointment with me, I expect that the author will get the reels and I will be checking.
And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And if they don't, I'm not going to do another interview because they're just trying to get every radio station they can. And I'm giving them not only airtime on 5 mega stations and podcasts, I'm giving them hours of my time.
Right. Somebody once said they would give me what they were selling or whatever coaching or whatever it was, but like for half off. And I was like, I tried not to be so offended because I just gave you so much of my time and heart, but whatever. Nobody understands, and nobody even understands how much editing goes into it, which I like, but they always say, oh my God, I sounded so great. I'm like, yes, you did. No, you didn't. Not in real life. So much torture. Every sentence is, but it didn't sound like that on the podcast.
Right. And sometimes I think, do they listen and go, wow, I sound amazing. And
I've had people say that they sound so great. Oh, they were so much more eloquent than they thought. And I was like, I did that, but I never say it. Just like when I edit a photo, it's the same thing. Sometimes I'll smush a sister in when I always say I'm doing them a favor. They just think they looked great that day, and they don't have to know that I made them a tiny bit skinnier. They just thought they looked great. And that's my gift to the world. I'm
glad you brought that up, because I think there is a certain amount of behind the scenes that we just do because we do. But when I look through how you have so many episodes and you highlight such amazing things, I wanted to commend you on so many things, on good editing.
Thank you.
On showing up and being consistent. And also every episode, like I didn't listen all the way through because I just met you. I just wanted to get to know you. You're a good interviewer and you highlight the person. You make it about them. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of podcasters make it about themselves. If I relate to a story and I say, oh, wait, I want to tell you this, I'm going to cut that out. Mm-hmm. Of the actual podcast. I work hard to make it all about them, but I do notice many podcasters don't, and you do. You self-reveal, like I knew that your mom passed at 46 and her mom from a podcast, but it was just, you just said it and then you moved right into the next thing, and it was so relatable. I use the word lean in, but I find myself leaning into that and really wanting to hear everything because of your generosity.
Thank you so much for saying that. When I was asking about podcast names, people were saying Hara's whatever, but it's not about me. But the reason I do give my life also is because, one person I interviewed has been incarcerated, I think 18 years, and still has like 20 more to go. But he was able to do this through Zoom, which was crazy. In a maximum security prison, I could interview him. He said that I made him feel safe because I had 2 brothers in jail and one died of a drug overdose. And I just want to be relatable, adding it just for relatability, that I have gone through my share of things, have had a lot of things happen to me so that I can understand where you've been. And that's what, that's part of it.
I think there should be a word for it, because what I see is people hijack the conversation, but you add enough to make it relatable. And the brilliant thing about doing that is when they feel safer, they talk more.
One of the episodes I didn't air was this guy who was just so technical that I couldn't understand what he was saying. I understand he was brilliant at whatever he was saying, but I asked him to dumb it down for like a teenager, but he still couldn't. And so I actually edited it and gave him the edited version, said, you can do whatever you want with it, but I'm not going to put it in my playlist. But I couldn't understand what he was saying. And if I can't understand it, I'm not stupid. I am my target market, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's important too, because we want our tribe to find us. And I want to get to your magazine and your photography. I see these beautiful pictures behind you. Can you talk a little bit about cover art, because you are a graphic designer and an artist?
Oh my gosh. Well, I see some pretty ugly cover art. It's for podcasts, for magazines, for everything. Well, first I want to say that I didn't come back to photography. I had a darkroom in high school. It was my passion, and I didn't come back to it until I went to that conference. So I've only been a professional photographer for like 4 years. What I'm known for is lighting and shining a light exactly where I want the eye to go. The irony is that I didn't go into photography because I was worried I wouldn't learn lighting. I couldn't learn it. So I like that. I like that full circle, that I'm known for lighting. But I think that that's with everything, with graphic design, with all the art that I do. And same thing with the podcast. It's all shining a light where I want the viewer's eye to go. That's true in cover art. Know where the eye is going to be drawn and what are you trying to say? Know what you're trying to say. Mm-hmm. So that's true in the photography as well as any design I do. And the podcast, I'm editing out all the superfluous stuff. I mean, there's nothing in there that I don't think the listener wants to hear. I have taken the time to edit out anything I've dedicated time so that you don't have to waste time.
Oh, Oh, I love that. I've dedicated time so you don't have to waste time.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to some podcasts where I'm like, just get to the point.
I've listened to some podcasts where there may be an author and I love their books, but I cannot sit through their podcast. When I teach podcasting and they push record and send it to me, I love it because then I can speak into a little bit. And so some people have things they do, like, let me tell you, I'm going to tell you. And I'm like, I'm going to take that out every single time, because if you say that to me, I'm going to hit next.
Right. And I always say, I take that part out and just say it. Like, that's a funny thing that I say even sometimes, but that's not necessary. But those are the kind of things I just want it to flow. I sound better on my podcast than I do in real life also.
I've been known to say,
Oh, me too.
What I love about that too is I do another podcast for adult survivors of childhood trauma, and my friend Kevin, who's the co-host, he edits. So I've taught him how to edit, because some people just take out the ands and ahs. It's like, no, take out all the superfluous, even like that. The word that is so unnecessary. And in radio, I would have to take 2 pages of a newspaper and put it into one paragraph. We had a guy, he did traffic, and he would always say, miles of misery. But he got in a habit of it. When the program director called, if he says miles of misery one more time, I'm going to make you fire him. If we don't listen to what we're putting out, a lot of times they'll say, I hate my voice. And so then they won't listen and they're missing out.
Right. And also, if everything's bold, nothing's bold. Like, you can't keep saying it because then it doesn't have any impact anymore.
Our talk station, I was doing editing for this one show, and I took out all the superfluous, all the repeat. For radio, it has to fit the slot of the half an hour. The program director is like, this is 7 minutes and I need 28. And I was like, oh, dang. So now I try to go over so I have room to take out all the extra.
I do usually cut it down half, because we do just chat about nothing sometimes, to get to the good stuff. When you mentioned your other podcast, when I started to feel bold enough to do this, right before I went to that conference, I went to see a nutritionist. I wanted to lose some weight, and I expected to get a diet from her, but she sent me to a trauma counselor because of all the things she got out of me, because I kept saying, oh, none of that matters. It's in the past. But I had been touched inappropriately at 7 and at 5. And anyway, seeing that trauma counselor really changed my life, because I had so much shame about that childhood experience of being touched and my body responding. She said, your body's made to respond. Like, at 50 years old, I was no longer in shame or in secret. And because I started sharing it, allowed people to see that I was a safe place. That is one of the things that kind of sparked these vulnerable conversations, because when we live with the secrets, that's where the shame resides. I want in my podcast to take away all that shame, talk to people who are dying or have lost children. I just want to always have the hard conversations, because we don't as a society. It's really, I think, helpful for people to know that other people go through things, because we just live with this fake image of social media. Even mine is fake. I'm not sharing the hard parts mostly. You're just seeing the highlights. We need to have these kind of conversations.
I'm so glad you brought that up. First of all, I'm sorry for what happened to you. Second of all, I was walking away from all of these Zoom calls and podcasts saying, what's wrong with me? Because I couldn't connect. I had trauma in my past, so I'd been doing the work of trauma. But what I recognized is 40% of our audience has ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. What happens is, the first is you guys. When people say you guys, then the person with trauma, they don't feel like they matter, because maybe they haven't got to self-love, or maybe they have, but it still triggers. They may not know why they tuned out, got on their phone, or walked away, but it triggers. And then when people tell stories and they'll say, when your parent dies and you have all these feelings, then I had somebody say, when they listened, they said, when my parent died, I was doing the dance of joy. So I tuned out, because I'm not going to listen to somebody telling me how I should feel. And that's why I am so passionate about how people talk and that they own their own story. I love what you said. When we start to share the story, other people can relate and it helps us. But I'm wondering, you had said, I don't know where I came to self-love. Do you think there was some connection there?
I do know where I came to self-love. I wanted to share that with people. Yeah. I didn't know how to share it, because I spent a lifetime thinking I'm not worth doing anything about, because I didn't think my mom did anything about the boy that did what he did. But one point, my daughter was about 20. She was saying she hates her body. And I just realized she was repeating me. She just learned behavior. It really shocked me because all I saw was this most precious, beautiful child that I created. And that reminded me that I was somebody's precious, beautiful child also created. I had never been able to think of young Hara in a soft way. My memories were kind of dark. I'm the youngest of 6 in only 9 years between the oldest and the youngest, and my mother was single with 6 of us. It was a crazy household. It was the 70s, so there was drugs and nobody was graduating high school, and it was just a lot of chaos. There was no way for me to feel safe and loved because I was in the middle of chaos. But I started to talk to myself as if I was young Hara. And like when I play tennis, I'd say, oh, good job. And now I can say young Hara. Now I just love young Hara. And I can see how great she was. And I shower her with love. I am literally parenting. I am the person I needed, and I am the person. I mean, it's so wonderful. I don't need anybody else to show Hara love, to know love. And that is what I hope for others, but it's really hard to convince people to even talk nicely to themselves. But if you can just remember the young kid in you and be kind to that young child, that was the answer for me. The last 10 years, at least, I have been showing my daughter, no matter what you look like, no matter how much you weigh, no matter what you know, what talents you do or don't possess, you are lovable. And your body is not what's lovable. It can be, but it's not the answer. It can be any size or shape. That's my goal in the world, is that beneath your beautiful, beneath whatever's underneath you, whatever's inside of you, that's what's beautiful. And so that's the point of the podcast as well, and the magazine. It's our stories and the hardships and the beauty that is wonderful. It's all of it. It's life itself is great, no matter all the things we've been through.
It seems to me that there are many people walking around with hurts, horrible self-talk. They bully themselves. They're mean to themselves. In my podcast class or any of my coaching classes, I will stop people. They know ahead of time, but I will stop them and say, you're not allowed to speak. You know, they go, well, I'm just doing self-deprecating humor. I go, no, it doesn't fly here because I value you. And when you diss you, then I'm going, wait, maybe, no, I know you're awesome. Causes so much confusion. I love it that your daughter was able to mirror that back to you.
Yes, I really love that too. She's been a good teacher for me.
If someone wants to find your podcast,
anywhere you listen, and it's Beneath Your Beautiful. And I have a magazine of the same name. And so anything can be found on beneathyourbeautiful.org. Same thing, but in pictures and stories rather than the podcast, but the same idea that we can rise above our adversities. And somebody taught me that I was interviewing that it's not overcoming because that's too big of a hurdle. They would never have been able to say they had overcome, but they could rise above. And so I've learned to change that language, and I really appreciate hearing that from him. Photography is Hara.photography, and I'm a graphic designer, and everything actually can be found on beneathyourbeautiful.org.
If you love this podcast, here's a big ask. Will you share with your friends and family, subscribe, give us a review, and a 5-star rating so that others looking to reinvent their lives will be able to get the help they're looking for? Thank you in advance.